I mean, why is that line still there? Okay, notebooks out. And that's the wrong one. We want that one. Or do I already have that one? Oh, we already have that one. Excellent. So here. Okay. I got a few emails about this particular assignment. We're actually going to spend a little bit more time on it now because I don't want to do it in terms of a lecture. What's that one? So you don't have to write these down. You have these as a handout for the assignment. And I got a couple of questions on. I don't really get the assignment, Mr. Neufeld. So, common objections to ethical objectivism. A first question would be, what is objective ethics? Yes? And explain set. Yeah. It right back to the whole, we're having an argument, and I would agree with you, but if I agreed with you, then we'd both be wrong. Like, it's possible to have wrong answers, is ethical objectivism. So when someone says something like genocide is wrong, if you think it's right, they can argue with you and say, no, you're wrong, and here's why. And there's a few ethical systems we'll look about. If you're of the ethics are personal and separate for everybody, and it just is based on your opinion, then you're a subjectivist, and you don't really have ethics. You have some opinions, but nobody can ever prove your opinion's wrong. It's like mint chocolate ice cream. If you like it, you like it. If you think genocide is correct, then it must be so for it to be you, because now we're just talking about opinions. And so ethical objectivism is the idea that things can be right and wrong, and it doesn't matter who you are. Yes? Subjectivism and relativism are two flavors of the same kind of thing. It's like the difference between mint chocolate ice cream and mint chocolate chip ice cream. Basically, they're both terrible, but slight differences. If you are a subjectivist, you are saying it's relative to yourself. I shouldn't have used the word relative when we're talking about subjectivism and relativism. So, if you say subjective, it is to the subject, to just you, and you can have a different opinion, like ice cream. If it's relativism, you can say it's relative to a group of people. So that's where you can say, in my culture, it is wrong to color maps for social studies. That's just bad. Nobody should ever do that. If your culture does that, that's fine. All ethics requires context. So I would say all ethical systems regardless, because the situation will change the facts. And if you're an objectivist, facts matter. And if you're a subjectivism, the facts might matter as well and shouldn't take place in case how you're interpreting it. So example of a relativist ethics might be in your particular group, you don't eat meat. That is not something you do. But if it's just relative to you, then another group can say we should eat only meat. And if you want to tell them that that's wrong, you have to have a reason that is independent of your group. That would be objective. If you can't, if it's not independent of your group, then that would make it relative just to your group. This is what you've all agreed on to be good things. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is relativism what? Oh, sophistry gets a bad rap, mostly because the philosophers that that we read about didn't like them. And so it became our term for rhetorical argument, sophistry. But I'm not as well versed to say that this is exactly what they believed in, but they did believe more in the in your own ability to individually, hold to your own truths. I would hesitate before I would say, though, that they didn't believe in objective ethics. Does that make sense? Yeah. We don't do that. And I would want to walk in with a lot more knowledge than I have now before I did that. But since you brought it up, where have you heard of them? Decent summary. It would, in a class context, if you're in debate, are you allowed to lie in debate to win? Are any of you in debate? Are you in debate? Yeah, so you can lie. And maybe the judges, but if the judges believe you and you win, then you win. The object of debate is not to find truth, it's to win. So that's why sophistry gets a bad rap. On the other hand, being able to convince other people's of arguments is an important part of every endeavor. If you're a scientist and you're like, hey, our planet's warming up, we should tell people, but you can't convince anybody, you're not going to have your truth doesn't matter. Yes. Well, yes and no. Ethics is concerned and is whether it's right or wrong, a bit like science is concerned if the right answer is right or wrong. Yet you still have to be able to communicate that. And rhetoric or sophistry would be concerned with how do you communicate that in the best way possible. Have you heard of ethos, logos, and pathos? So logos is like the only part that worries about whether or not it's true. But all the other parts are necessary in order to put it across. Yeah. The way we're using the term of sophistry right now would say it's a tool that can be used. When we do rhetoric, it's a tool in the same way that all of it has a light side and a dark side. And you can use it to present the correct answers, or you can use it to sell people products they don't need. Either would work. Although, again, the sophists were a particular group of people we borrow that term from. And all of this is not necessarily indicative of who they were in the past. So all of these pages, the part in bold, in black, is an objection to the idea that you can be right and wrong in ethics. So we start off with the idea that you can be right or wrong. Yes? Pardon? Oh, yes, because I'm using objective and then I said objection. Let me rephrase it without using the word objection. This is a way of saying that ethical objectivism is wrong. So this is a common way of saying I either don't believe or don't accept ethical objectivism because moral disagreements are just disagreements of opinion, like ice cream flavors. So an objection is a way of saying, I think that's false because. Does that make sense? Okay, yes. No. You're supposed to rewrite that in words that you understand. Yeah. And then you rewrite or summarize. Now, you don't have, like, this one is a lot. And it's all kind of saying the same thing. So you can pick one out of here and explain it in words that you understand. Because the part in bold is the disagreement with the ethical objectivism. So this person in bold doesn't think that ethics can be right or wrong because it's just opinion. And this is the response to that that's often given in a philosophy text. And just so you're aware, like, it doesn't feel like it is a philosophical response. And I think to explain that, I might have to go, let's use science, where we have actual right or wrong answers you can investigate. Let's say in science, I am trying to name an experiment you have done. You extracted DNA from a strawberry. That's more of a task than an experiment. But we've got DNA extraction. And what did you get? And you got weird gooey. And it was pink. Because probably not all the strawberry was eliminated. Yep. And then they said, ta-da, this is DNA. Is this an experiment? No, this is more of an illustration. Here's to prove to you with your senses that DNA exists. We're going to extract things, then we're going to point at it, and we're going to say it's DNA. Is it DNA? Yeah, we don't know if it is or not. You probably have to do another test. But it is, if you trust the person, it is a way of doing it. An experiment would be, let's do a very simple one. I have a box. This is an experiment that you'll sometimes see inside of areas where they want to teach kids about the scientific method. And the box is completely enclosed. It has a hole in the top, and it has a hole out the side. And the middle, you can't see. You drop things in the box, and you see what falls through, and you reach in and grab them out. And your job is to guess what shape the holes are in the middle of the box that's allowing to drop through. So you throw in a bunch of marbles, all the marbles come through. You pull them out. Okay, it has to be bigger than that side, and if it's round or square. You put in a star of a similar size, and it doesn't fall through. And now you start to elucidate as to what the holes are. Why, in terms of your assumptions here, why does having an accurate answer matter? Yeah? Sorry? Sure, you've been told to do that and you want to know the truth. But why does that make it true? You will never, ever see what's inside there. So you will never have 100% confirmation. Yeah. 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 Well, I know you know that now, but why does that affect what shape you think it is? What are you basing your what you think the shape is on? Well, sure, but you're basing it on utility. Like, practically, if it goes through, then I'm going to propose the shape. But what if I said, I'm going to ignore everything I fall through, and I think all of the shapes are hearts. And I think they're hearts because that makes me feel good about myself. Every time I look at the heart, I think of my lovely spouse. And I go, aw. And so I'm going to say that they're hearts. Now, you have objections to that because there's no way some things would fall through that are falling through. Why am I actually wrong? Well, you never know for sure, but is there anything wrong with picking the wrong answer? Yeah, but I don't care about the utility. I actually don't care if it works. And it doesn't matter. Science has a really heavy bias on practicality, whether or not something works. That's a bias. And practically, it allows you to build bridges. It doesn't necessarily work for other things. There are different ways of knowing things. And you can just say it's that. And if that allows you to live your life better, that's okay. Like, there's no particular reason why you have to do it that way. If you value getting things out of the holes and having an accurate measure of what the hole looks like, and this is part of a giant mining operation, and this is some unknown event that you have to work all the ore through, then yeah, knowing the shape of the hole would be really useful. But you'll never know if it's actually true, and if it makes you sad, then that is also another thing that you have to consider. Science is one domain of philosophy that values utility. And people who are traditional scientists tend to see everything in that particular way. So sometimes in philosophy, in other areas, we look at things and we go, it doesn't feel like this. Ethics doesn't feel like science. You can't do experiments. But it does feel like math. And maybe that means it is math. There's no experiment we can do that will show whether it is math or not, and there is no sieve that we can test. So I just want to say, this saying it feels like is reflecting on your experience and is a practical philosophical approach. That doesn't mean it's random, because I do have people like, ethics can be anything because philosophy can be anything. It's not quite what it is. You look at it and you do thought experiments. Yes, your hand was up for a long time. Yeah. Oh, okay. But I already answered it, or it was already offered, or now it's just gone past? Oh, okay. Sorry. I had the reins between my teeth and I kept running. So this is just noting that they're similar, and we don't feel about ethics that we seem to feel about things that are opinions. Yeah. Yeah. So there's ethical objectivism. There's the argument against ethical objectivism, and then the argument against ethical objectivism. And you're supposed to summarize those two. Yeah, both of them. So what is that, and then what is that? I'm just going to go through them a little quickly. So this one's a lot. And this is, when it says it feels like it, the reason there's so much writing here is because they're talking about all the different ways we notice and feel about that. When I talk about genocide being wrong, when I say genocide is correct, everybody goes, whoa, and they take a step back, because that means something. Where if I said chocolate chip mint cookies or ice cream is good, nobody really gets that worked up. So we don't treat it the same. It feels different. Unless I'm really hungry, I'm not that motivated by chocolate peanut butter ice cream, although I will say it's a little motivating. This particular one, moral judgments are motivating. Facts aren't. Morals are not facts. Moral judgments can be true beliefs, which are both facts and motivating. And there are plenty of facts that are motivating. If we knew that an asteroid was coming to this particular spot, we would probably be fairly motivated to move. If the fire alarm went off, which would be a fact, we'd probably be fairly motivated to move. The motivation argument, facts aren't in and of themselves motivationless. And then someone would suggest, well, if they're facts, where are these facts existing? Because we can't seem to do experiments to find them. theological, we would defer to Euthyphro, and we would say the Euthyphro dilemma, in which they must exist outside of the deity. But in non-nature, we have other things that don't exist in the universe, like math. We don't do experiments with math. We just use intuition. Ethics might be like intuition. So the fact we can't point to them in the same way that we can point to, say, rocks, is the same way we can't point to mathematical examples. We can just look at descriptions that seem to match our universe. Morals are just Darwinian adaptations to get along. As an objection, I do find this one strange. If they are facts, then Darwinian adaptations definitely use facts. Anybody who's cut open a fossil and has seen the mathematical nature of how they're constructed, who's done levers, who's calculated anything, knows that math is tracked through evolution because it corresponds to it. And it might be that it tracks it because it's true. And I have a video for that. Because I have heard a related one. Because there's both this one. I don't think I mentioned it. But some people say that the only things that have the opposite, morals haven't been adapted, humans just came up with it, no other animals are moral. Therefore, morality can't be objective. Well, if it is real, it could be tracked by evolution because it's useful. And if you think that it isn't real because only humans came up with it, I have these monkeys.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that already with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task, and we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us, and that's what she does. And she gets a grape, and she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets a...
So does everybody understand the task involved? So they give them a rock, they put the rock somewhere. This one's only being fed cucumber. This one's only being fed grapes. This one knows the other one's now being fed cucumber. The equivalent of, you both do a chore at home. If you have a sibling, when you do the chore, you get told thank you. When your sibling gets done the chore, they get paid $50.
Again, cucumber.
And she chucks it at him.
Tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
And so, and as he said, this has been shown, particularly mammals have a really strong preference for this. So you can see this in dogs, cats. If you are unfair, they notice and they will follow up on it. They won't like you as much. Yeah. Like they may want the grape, but why did the monkey throw it at the researcher? Yeah. Oh, what's not shown is if the researcher gave the monkey cucumber, and for the first time, the monkey ate the cucumber, right? And he gave the other monkey grapes. If you do this, and you have the grapes out, and you have the cucumbers out, and you feed both of them cucumbers, that reaction does not happen. If the monkey knows they're both getting cucumbers, he's perfectly happy to do it over and over and over again. They do both like grapes. But if you give one grapes and the other cucumber, then the one gets upset because they're missing out. And they notice that they're missing out and the other one is getting something that they're not. Monkeys will also try to make up for fairness in that in a group when this happens in a natural setting, not locked away in two separate cages when they know, is if one gets too much, they will offer some to another one to make it more fair. We tend to see this more often in social creatures, which would make sense because if ethical fairness is a thing that evolution would track, then you would probably tend to find it more often in group settings where people need to behave ethically within their group. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense? Yep. Oh, we don't know if the monkey would care. There's no way for it to make up for it, and it likes grapes. Oh, the grapes are... Have you not had grapes? And have you had cucumber? Which one do you like better? No, cucumbers are terrible. What are you talking about? They're not as good as grapes. If you do think it's better, then you might have a different reaction. But we can take it as read that from his experience with capuchin monkeys, they always like, and especially these ones, they like grapes more than cucumbers. So their preference doesn't really matter because you could redo the experiment with animals that have a different preference, and they do for like dogs and things who don't eat grapes. And they will find the same things. Dogs will prefer a dog treat over their regular dog food. When they notice that their companion dog, who's in a different cage but they can see, gets a treat instead of dog food for the reward for a task, they will get upset. Yeah. But if they're both getting just regular dog food, they're happy to do it. This is a strong behavior. We've seen it over and over again in mammals. Fairness seems to be really, really built in to our genes in a way that we don't seem to track other things. And we are, of course, highly social animals. We cooperate in large groups. I don't have it anymore, but a clip of a researcher talking about one of the most dangerous things that humans do is get on a flight and go somewhere with other humans. If you put any chimpanzee or ape or monkey species in a plane and gave them unrestricted access to their fellow people, and you just flew them, they would probably tear each other apart. Because being confined in a small space for that long, they would not know how to cooperate with other, not their own troop, but stranger monkeys. Yet we get on planes and buses and things with strangers all the time, and we've learned to cooperate as a group in large amounts. We've really pushed our ethical behavior so that we don't act silly. Now, of course, sometimes we do, but for that, the airline attendants have duct tape, so it seems to work out relatively well. Everybody has seen the duct tape example in the last little while? No? Don't know if I should show that. The duct tape example? Duct tape on a plane. Good Morning America would probably have a fairly nice version. That wouldn't be crude.
Seen on a Frontier Airlines flight, where a flight attendant strapped an unruly passenger to a seat with duct tape after he groped two of the attendants, assaulted a third. Will Reeve has the story. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, George. What a wild situation. The man had allegedly been drinking. The video of the incident is quite shocking. At one point, there's a threat facing charges, accused of unruly behavior on a Frontier Airlines flight from Philadelphia to Miami Saturday. Police say
Nope.
Barry had been drinking and groped two female flight attendants and assaulted a male flight attendant. Barry is seen here swinging at the man, trying to restrain him.
He started raising his voice.
Now, we don't need to go into detail, but it is not in the animal kingdom amazing that humans do that once in a while. It's amazing that most of us don't. We're on an airplane with other strange mammals, not necessarily with our family troop, and yet we know how to behave in a way that allows us to get from point A to point B. And he was drunk. He had lots of people get drunk on airplanes, and this is fairly rare. Yeah, like a lot of people don't like to fly, and so you'll learn this later when you turn 19. But some people use alcohol to feel better about things. It's not always the best method, but sometimes they do. Yeah. Sorry, what? Because they're laughing. What? I think you have to repeat it if they're laughing. I want in on the joke. No, you have to now. How would you know? I guess we're Germans. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. No, it's not 8. It's 12 in the company of your parents? And then older if you want like hard liquor. Yeah. Yeah. It's dangerous when you're flying because you can be over Alberta, which the age is 18. And you ask you're 18, you're like in grade 12, 18, hey, can I have a drink? The airline delivers it, and then you drink it. And then you cross over the border in British Columbia, and now it's 19, and then you instantly die because now it's poisonous. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to be very careful about where you are. Next one. One is rational choice theory. Rational choice theory is, this is a part of game theory, whereas how can you make the best decision to get the most out of it for yourself and society and everything else? And it essentially, in one sense, is an argument from authority and like, this is what we need to do to get along. We often notice that when we have moral progress, gay marriage, abortion, trans, it often, just trans, people, we often notice that it disrupts the current conventional working of society. People protest. People get upset, and then they protest, and then they say things that are outrageous, like women deserve votes. And then they do it long enough, and then they throw things, and then eventually women get some votes. But, then for a while we just discourage the women from voting and we try to construct things so they have the rights, but then they can't. And then they keep disrupting things until finally they can. This doesn't seem like a very good example of rational choice theory. If you claim to be able to discover rational choice theory science, often if you go into those readings, it doesn't resemble science. They're trying to say you can do experiments on it. I have not seen one that actually resembles real science. They often seem to be very different versions of thought experiments that try to mimic science. And when we talk about moral things, they're often incredibly disruptive to the society at the time. Mass changes are made. People get really upset. How can you mean this? When we're talking about trans rights, there was a couple of years where they said, like, this is the only joke that they seem to know, and they would make it over and over and over again because they're so upset. They grew up thinking one way, and now they're being told things are a different way. And the vast majority didn't seem to like it, and we're moving on that. I'm really curious what's going to come up in the next 10 years. So if you're saying it's rational choice theory, maximizing alliances, doing what you need to do to get along, the people concerned with moral progress often don't seem to care whether or not they're getting along with people. They care about whether or not they're right. This has come up saying that, you know, ethics is an old white guy thing, and it's based on the principles of impartiality, and that's biased against other people. And I would certainly accept the argument that any field of study can have a bias based on the people who wrote it, because they might have had a bias. And that's been true in science, and any other field as well. But to reject the whole thing, saying that it's the ideal of impartiality is biased because it's not impartial, is itself a paradox. I think pointing out the biases is an incredibly important process, and removing them is important. But there still can be things that are right and wrong. We just may have been wrong about a lot of them for a fair amount of time. A classic example of this, which is really obscure in terms of the importance of having diverse groups of people looking at a thing. There's two examples, one really obscure, one related to human evolution, is the story of why we have big brains. For a long time, the story is because men needed to hunt, and hunting requires cooperation. And so when men needed to run around and hunt the big game, they would have to cooperate with each other. The bigger brains they had, the more they could socially cooperate, the more game they brought home. More nutrition for the tribe means more children, which means over time, bigger and bigger brains. We now know that humans didn't hunt nearly as often as we thought they did. They were scavengers quite a lot, like vultures. Find a dead animal, carve it up. Not necessarily a lot of hunting going on, because hunting's hard. However, cooperating in a group and gossip really, really, really requires a lot of brain power. Art requires a ton of brain power. Art of whether it's singing or sculpture or painting, and it doesn't seem very evolutionary advanced. Like, what is the purpose of a painting or a sculpture? It doesn't seem to attribute a lot, but it shows how good your brain is. And if your brain is really healthy, that's probably a healthy human. They now think it's probably due to sexual selection, in which at some point we started selecting each other based on the amount of fairly useless things we could do, like art. And so when we were selecting a potential mate, if you could create art, that was the sign of a healthy brain. Had nothing to do with men and hunting. This came about, this theory, once more female researchers entered the field and started looking at the facts with a different eye than the biases of the previous one. Then together they came up with this new theory. As well, if you want to know the most complex thing that you can do in terms of a human that separates you from other primates or apes very quickly, is that you can just say that I know that she knows that you know that I know. And that is every soap opera or complicated relationship show you ever see. That's all we do. And when you think about the importance of knowing who's sleeping with whom's in most soap opera genres, and how important that would be in early human societies, gossip might have been a primary driver of human evolution. And those are our current theories. We'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, and I'll introduce it. But what I would like now, you've done 3 theoretically, right? 2 theoretically. I would like you to add 2 more. Now that we've sort of gone through it, you can go back, fix your other ones, unsubmit if you already submitted, add 2 more. And you have time now to do it in. I've talked way too long. Hold it. Did I remember to start the live stream? I did. Excellent. And while you're getting started on that, I will take attendance. I should have asked before you get started. Does anybody have any further questions of it? Is there anything that's still lingering after we've done all that explanation? Okay. Yes. 2 more you haven't done. And you can also fix your first 2 if you're like, I didn't understand it. Now that I've heard that, I understand it. Yes. Yes. Bring it on up. Are you writing down words in a row? That sounds like you should be doing. So that question looks at that and restates it in your own words. Okay? And that one restates underneath it the objection to that in your own words. Oh, then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you if it's right. Yeah. Okay, so we have Yvonne and Chloe and Mimi. There we go. Nicholas and Tedra. There's Tedra. Tatum. Lucia. Cassidy. Josie. Oh, not here today. Charlie. And Abigail. And then Michael, Jonathan, and Philip. Excellent. That's fine. So fine. I am. Mm-hmm. What? Oh, the Euthyphro dilemma. If we go all the way back here, when we did this, that's the Euthyphro dilemma. There is allowed, apparently.
Of people, the source of these edicts.
Here. I will add that to our Google Classroom as a backup. But do you remember when we did the two horns of dilemma? Either something, if you say that all goodness comes from the deity, then what is good becomes arbitrary because the deity could say anything was good. Or if you say that the deity just points out what's true, then there's actually some good that comes from outside the deity. It's external, and that would imply something that bounds the deity. Do you remember that discussion? That's the Euthyphro dilemma. The crash course, like many things, is pretty good on it. I've generally found their chemistry and philosophy reasonably good. There's some sections in geology I didn't think they were so good at the time, but it's been a while. But if you're interested in seeing another explanation as well, I've got a divider. I will post that there. There we go. are we doing? Okay. Almost done, or? Okay. How are we doing? Decent? Okay. Finished in class or finished by prep? Say. Oh, finished probably now. Would you finish in class or finish by prep? Prep, sure. How about yourself?
I'm just pacing into mine.
Oh, okay. So you're basically done?
No.
Oh, okay. So you still want finished by now or prep? Okay. Yourself? It means, in terms of the plain reading of the words, one of the principles of ethics is that you should be impartial, and impartial just means you should be fair to everyone equally. So the idea that we shouldn't show favoritism towards one person or one group of people. Is that? Yeah, yeah. And that includes not just equal; that also includes equity. Do you know the difference between equity and equal? Equal is when you treat everyone the same. Equity is when you make sure that everybody has the same opportunity. So, for example, let's say BC had a program by which you could get food at school for people who, like, maybe their homes, they don't have enough food in the homes. So they want to make sure everybody's fed. So they have a school lunch program. Equality means maybe they give the same amount of food to every single student. Equity might mean they identify the students who need the food and they give them more to bring them up to the same level as everybody else. Maybe take some home so they have enough for dinner because they don't have enough food. So equity is making sure everybody gets to the same level. Equal means you treat everybody exactly the same. Both of those are included in impartiality. The principle of impartiality implies equity as well as equality. Yeah. Good question before I go to the other side. Yeah.
Done all of it or
The four. Yep. Your phone is out. Why is your phone out? Oh, I have to take it then. Sadness. I put it in my pocket. I really enjoy the feeling of a nice heavy phone. How are you doing? How many have you done? Oh, questions. Impartial means treating people fairly and equally. Is that the one you're doing first? What did you get done last night? Okay. And so which one are you working on right now? Wait, at the very least, you just have to pick one and do that one. So which one are you going to tackle first? Is that one seems the easiest one to you? Okay. So you want to restate what's in bold in your own words. So what does that mean in your own words? I'll come back to you. How are you? Well, you can pick four, so you don't have to pick that one if you don't want to. But if you go there, what this person, what do you think that means?
It says that moral facts don't exist.
Yes. And they're asking a specific question. They're like, if they exist, where do they exist? Because if I point to facts about Australia, we can go to Australia and learn the facts. If I point to facts about astronomy, we can look at stars and figure out the facts. But if in what universe do facts about moral theory exist? We can't point to them.
We can only guess.
Yeah. So that's their objection. Does that make sense? Okay. And are you completely done?
I finished all the two that were last time.
And then you've just done the other two now? Okay. How are you doing?
Yeah, I finished.
Oh, you've got the four? Okay. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I did my two.
Okay. And you're working on the other two, or you're done the other two? Working on them? And yourself? You are finished all four? Excellent. How are you doing? You're getting there. Any questions? That's all good. How are you doing? You're doing okay. And how are you finding it? Okay. Easy, more or less. Okay. How are you doing? Oh, rational choice theory. Excellent. What website are you on? Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah.
I should have did this one, but I don't know if I'm supposed to write more because there were only 2 points here.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The other ones I can write as much as
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna did the same thing.
Okay. Sounds good. Michael. So let's say, but it is unjustly but. That is the, yeah, so you've restated that one. Excellent. You want to then restate the objections to that objection. So they said objective facts are wrong, and this is why they're saying that is wrong. Does that make sense? Can you summarize that one? Oh, right, that's not my phone. Before you go, just after this section, we are going to close the door on this a little bit. This entire area is going to go away because we're just going to come down and say that objective ethics are objective and treat it as such. Because otherwise, we can't even talk about right and wrong. So even if I haven't convinced you, that's not particularly the job at this point. And so we are just going to say that there is a right and wrong. And it's a hard question. You can disagree. I will say 56% the last time they polled professional philosophers said that objective ethics were true. These are people who have PhDs in ethics and study it for a living. And you may think that 56% sounds like a small number, like, oh, just barely half. Less than half of philosophers agreed whether or not there is actually an objective reality, as in this actually exists. So getting 56% of them to agree is, at that level, is actually quite a bit. And so at some level, there are a lot, but that implies there are 44% who don't agree, that think that it is all subjectivism or some type of relativism. So if you go forward thinking, no, I really don't think it's true, that's okay. I'm going to be teaching you some objective ethical systems. You might find that you change your mind afterwards, but if you don't, that's fine. You've got a long time to figure this out. I have changed my ethical system multiple times over my lifetime, and as I learn more knowledge, I would hope I do so again. You're good to go. If you're done, we're going to continue on from there next day. Homework for tonight, if you haven't finished it now. No, just the 4. Just 4. Michael, are you okay to continue that on your own tonight? Do you think you can get it done? Okay. Let me know if you're having more struggles with it. Okay. And that eye is deeply disturbing. You're welcome.